Hello and welcome to the Empowered Expat Wife podcast. If you moved abroad following your significant other and are looking to create a fulfilled life on your terms there, this is the place to be. I'm your host, Camilla Quintana, and I'm so excited to be on this journey with you and to inspire you to create the kind of life abroad you truly deserve. Hi, everyone. I'm so glad you're with us today. Today is actually an episode really dear to my heart because it's released on the occasion of the upcoming International Women's Day. And as you know, at the Empowered Expat Wife podcast and in my coaching practice, I cater to women. And so it's really my mission to help and inspire as many expat women as possible to create meaningful and fulfilled lives on their terms, despite of changing postcodes. And today's special guest is Nyna Caputi. Welcome, Nyna.
Thank you so much, Camilla, for having me on the show. And I'm excited to be interviewed for this podcast in honor of International Women's Day and Women's History Month.
I'm so excited too. I'm so thrilled to have you. And as I was thinking about who to invite for this episode, obviously you immediately came to mind. But after reading your bio, I knew there was no one better to be interviewed for this episode.
Thank you.
And even though we've been knowing each other for like 2 years or over 2 years, I guess, and collaborating, but there were a few things I didn't know about you. So let me properly introduce Nyna. She is the founder and CEO of the Expat Woman. She's also the co-founder and producer at Bel Air Films and the creator of a Digital Event Academy, Start Yours Bootcamp, Empowered Women's Leadership Conference, Survive and Thrive Abroad Summit, the All Women Hackathon, and the Female Founders Pitch Female Founders. It's a lot of female in there. I love that. Then she's also an award-winning documentary filmmaker, and her most recent film, Petals in the Dust, focused on gender violence in India. You have to let us know where we can watch that.
Sure. So, the film actually right now it's private because it's a very I wouldn't say controversial, but it does delve very deep into issues that happen among girls and women in India. And it did screen in festivals, but after the whole festival route and the public screenings, I haven't made the link public just because I am concerned about me being able to travel to India, and again because of the topic of the film, because it's something that is not openly discussed in India, because 50
Right.
million girls have been eliminated from India's population in the last century just because they were girls. And it's something India's coming to terms with, they're working with. And when they're ready for the film, then I will make it public. I haven't screened it in India. It's screened in the US and Canada and parts of Europe. But India is still,
Yeah.
I feel not ready. So that's why I haven't
I
made it.
understand. But I think
Yeah.
it's so amazing that you're doing this work, and I did not know you were a filmmaker. Can you believe it? So I would absolutely love to see it.
I would love for people to see it. Yeah, sure.
Yes. And then speaking about, being active in this good cause, um, Nina also founded the Global Walk for India's Missing Girls in 2010 in San Francisco, which is an international awareness campaign on the violence and genocide of Indian women. So wow, goosebumps. I mean, this is such an important cause, and I'm so happy that women like you are really taking a stand for this. And then also in honor of her work to end misogyny and empower women, she received the Women of the Year 2015 California State Assembly, as well as numerous other awards. So that's all very impressive. And as I said, I love that you're so active in helping women to progress. So now let us know a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your life and your expat journey.
Sure. So I came to the US to study film. And as you said, you didn't know I was a filmmaker, but that's how my expat journey started, because my uncle, my cousin are very creative. They're both filmmakers. I studied biotechnology, but I think I was not cut out to work in a lab. I'm creative and I'm very social, and So I came here to study film in New York, and made a couple of short films. And I met my husband, he's a second generation Italian, Swiss, and French, but he's more US than European, because he's been here for, he's a second generation. And how I met him is another story. We can do a whole episode on that. But
Okay,
that's
good to
how.
know.
But he's a filmmaker too, and that's how I landed up living in the US. I wasn't, I wasn't planning on living here. In fact, I had a job waiting for me back in India, which was working on social justice documentary films. And that's how I even got my visa to come to the US, because it's very hard for Indian women, especially single Indian women, to come to the US, because their fears,
Oh,
they'll
wow.
stay on and get married, and that's exactly what happened. But that was not my intention. And so
Right.
I'm kind of like an accidental expat, because I just came with like suit the course was very intense. It was a 2-month filmmaking course. So I came with a suitcase of clothes, just enough and it was, I think, in August, September, October. So I brought, like, I didn't even have any winter clothes. I just came with clothes that I could wear to school. And New York at that time of the year is perfect. And of course, we married very soon after that, because my husband was worried that I'd go back to India, and my parents would set me up with some guy through an arranged marriage.
Oh,
So
right.
so it all happened so
So he put a
quickly.
ring on it.
He did, yeah. And after later he told me, I don't know, after I proposed to you and you said yes, I was like, oh my goodness, my whole life's going to change. But and then he's a San Francisco native, so we moved to San Francisco. And as loving and supportive that my husband is, I was not ready to move to a new country and handle all the hurdles and challenges that come with it.
Right. What was the hardest part for you?
I think when I moved, when after we married, and because my husband was in film and he used to work on a lot of the Hollywood and independent film productions in San Francisco, he was gone for most of the time. In fact, initially my father-in-law would call me the film widow, because I was alone so much of the time, and
Oh,
I didn't have my work permit yet, so I couldn't work. So one was not being able to work, and then you go to a party and people will always ask you, what do you do? And I didn't have a response, because wasn't working. I wasn't really doing anything. So I think that was the
yeah.
hardest thing, not having an identity,
Yeah.
after being a professional, and suddenly just saying, and I wasn't even sure what I wanted to do. So
Right.
I think that was the hardest thing. I mean, there were other challenges, but at that point, that was like, I'm not making any money, I don't have a job, I don't know what to say when people say, what do you do?
Yeah, that's really, I think that's so hard for our self confidence and for our self worth, our sense of self worth, just what you just described. And that's why it can be so unbearable to go through moments like that.
Right.
But anyway, as we will discuss later, things have changed drastically since then. But before that, can you let us know who were your female role models when you were growing up or even right now, and why?
I didn't really have, like, a lot of people today will say they want to be like, there seem to be so many successful women. And because of social media, it's easier to learn about them in the news. Growing up, I didn't watch much TV, and there wasn't anyone. So I'd say really a lot of the women in my family, starting with my great grandmother, she had 17 children. And
Wow,
yeah, she was,
incredible.
and she was such an amazing lady. And she had a lot of great grandchildren and grandchildren. She always remembered our names, and she made me feel so special. And even though she had 17 children, she didn't adopt them legally, but her house was open to everyone. So she always had these additional kids who said, oh, we're the adopted kids. Her name was Rose. We're the adopted kids of Granny Rose. And she just had so much warmth and love and compassion. So that she was, I didn't think of her as a role model, but I was very influenced by her. And I'd also say the other women in my family, my mother, my grandmother, my aunts, they were all, my mom wasn't working, she used to be a teacher, but she was very supportive of everything we did. And she didn't discriminate between me and my brother, where in a lot of families in India, the boys are valued over the girls. And I would say, even though we talk about female role models, my dad was also played a very you know, a major role in my life, because he wanted me, you know, again, he didn't discriminate between my brother and me. And he taught me a lot of things about being successful, about being positive, which has helped me in my journey as an expat. So, you know, and then, you know, with my aunts and my mom, my grandmother, again, the compassion, you know, they were always doing social work. They were always helping those who were less privileged. And I think that created in me this, so the need to be successful, positive, and also compassionate, and help those who may not at some point in their life have what you have or need your support. So those were my role models. I didn't think of them as role models, but now when I look back, they did play such a major role in who I am today.
Mm-hmm. That's so great. It's nice when you can say, right, that it's your family members actually.
Right.
All right. And when you moved to the US, you just briefly described it was really hard at first and you didn't expect it. And obviously, you didn't know anyone, right? So,
Right.
how did you start building a network of women, which we know is so important? And
Mhm.
yet, when you move abroad, you don't have that.
Right. And as I said again, because I was an accidental expat, I didn't read up on, you know, what to expect when you move to a new country, what kind of resources can you find. And I also being married to an American man, I threw a, even though he's traveled abroad and even though he, you know, his great grandparents were immigrants, or his grandparents, he being born in a country where where you live and which you're a native of, you're not aware when you marry a spouse who's an expat, you're not aware of the hurdles and challenges they face, and you
Yeah.
might not even notice the signs that the person is facing these hurdles. And also because he was from a, you know, I was Indian, he was American, and I, when you first move to a country, you want to mix with people from your country because you feel such a huge sense of homesickness and wanting
Mm.
to connect. His friends were all American. I mean, you know, he didn't have any Indian friends in his circle. And as I said, he was gone for long hours. So it was very lonely. And also, you know, like trying to find a job, even things like how do you dress for, you know, an interview? How do you dress for a baby shower in the US, you know, or a bridal,
Yeah.
you know, you get invited for things like even things like potluck. In India, potluck is when you go to someone's house and they pull everything out of the refrigerator and share it with you. In the US, potluck is where everyone takes a dish to a party. So there were all these things I was learning. And then, you know, I'd look
Yeah.
online and there were no resources. And I said, I really need a community of women to help me navigate this, because when I was in New York, I was staying in the dorm and everyone there was international. So we were all, you know, navigating New York together, whether it was taking the subway or figuring out how to use a coin operated washing machine in the dorm. It was, we were all learning together. And suddenly I was living in, you know, beautiful San Francisco you know, in the Haight-Ashbury Coal Valley part of San Francisco, which is really lovely. But I had no one to, you know, navigate this city with. And I looked online, and at that time, meetups, this was in 2002, there were no meetups or, you know, all these networking groups that we have today. I don't think there was any expat community. Maybe there was internations, I'm not sure. And that's when I was like, I need to create a community so I can, there are other women that we can, just like in New York, I need this support
Yeah.
group so we can help each other.
Yeah. I love that. And it is so important. I think a lot of times community is really that piece that makes us feel like we're at home. I mean, it's important to have a few friends, but I think community is like the next step, right? That's like a group of people where you have your place and you feel like you belong there and you're seen and you're heard and the other ones are too. And for me at least, it's really what makes a place feel like home, or what can make a place feel like home.
Absolutely. And you know, now with the expat woman, when I ask women what's their biggest hurdle, it's usually that they don't have friends or a network
Yeah.
of community. That trumps even finding a job or, you know, bringing
Right.
in income. It's really, and I think for women, men don't need it as much as women. My husband be really happy just sitting in front of the TV
Mine
watching.
too.
Yeah,
I
and I
know.
don't
I'm
know.
the one who's like, let's meet people, let's go out. I mean,
Right,
right now is a difficult time, and we
right,
haven't been here for that long before the pandemic that really
right.
restricted us, obviously, in meeting others. But yeah, I think it is really women. And I mean, it makes sense, right? Because we used to be back in the Stone Age, right? We used to be the gatherers, we were together, we were sharing the tasks that were to do, like taking care of the kids and creating that home, right? Whatever that meant back
Right,
then. And we
right.
did it all together, and we were always really big communicators. So I think it is really particularly important for women to have and to build and belong to some kind of community.
Absolutely, Camila. That is so true and so correct. And we don't realize it, and sometimes we think there's something wrong with us because we yearn for this, especially as expats.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's important to know that and to find that, because I didn't realize that that was what I needed, and I was looking maybe in the wrong places because I was trying to make friends with other, because I was meeting mostly Americans. Um, and they already had their own communities and their own support groups, so they didn't really need me as much as I needed them. Whereas when I would meet, and this is what I found with the Expat Woman and community that I've created, that sometimes I get to my events place early, and I'll be taking the elevator, and there'll be a bunch of people in the elevator, and this will be like in a crowded office building in downtown San Francisco. And the minute the people start talking to me, women in the elevator, I know they've come to the Expat Woman event, and I know they're international. It just seems to be when you're an expat in a country, you tend to be more friendly because you are looking, even if you don't think about it, you're subconsciously looking to connect with people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think so too. So now talking about, the community and the being there for one another and helping one another, what do you think each woman can do to support other women, both personally and professionally?
Sure. So I think, what I've realized during this pandemic, Mila, is that we think we're not good enough. So like I've been doing all these events before the pandemic hit. I was getting all these speakers, but I never spoke at my events. I always facilitated and brought in other people. And when I was doing my documentary film, I needed to be in the limelight because had to promote my film, and people wanted to interview me, and maybe I was in the media so much that I got burnt out. But with the Expat Woman, I kind of took a back seat and was promoting the Expat Woman but not promoting myself. And I think that is the issue, that many of us, before we can even help other women, we need to look at ourselves. Do we suffer from the imposter syndrome? What are we afraid of? Are we afraid because we don't like, being on camera, or don't like public speaking, or just don't think we're good enough? And I think so. First of all, we need to help ourselves before we can help other women. So I think it's really important for us to get out of the shadows and
Mm-hmm.
into the spotlight, so that no matter what, all of us have some expertise. Even if you've never had a professional job, maybe potty trained your baby at 1 years old. You could share that expertise, and maybe other people, women who are struggling with that, moms, you could help them with that. So
Yeah.
there's, all of us have that zone of genius. So I think first we need to discover it, and
Mm-hmm.
like you help expat wives and empower them, and then once we discover that, then we can support you. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to do podcasts or Zoom meetings, but you could support them in your own little way. Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
Yeah, totally. So look for something that you're good at, and we're all good at something, or that we've done, or that we've mastered and achieved, and then you can help others do the same, right? And
Right, right.
I wanted to add, when you said that we should get out of the shadow and not have so much imposter syndrome, which is true. A lot of women suffer from that, definitely. And I was thinking, maybe it's not just about our own insecurities and our own limiting thoughts and beliefs. Maybe it's also the fear of what other women could say about us. And that's something that I think, we should all strive to change and ask ourselves, are we the kind of woman that supports others in cheering her on when she ventures out, for instance, or does something on her own? Do we encourage her? Do we compliment her? Or are we a little jealous? Do we hate on her? Do we criticize her for not doing it perfectly or whatever, right?
I didn't even think about that, but absolutely. I think sometimes women can be the biggest critics of other women, and I
Of
think
other
you're
women.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. So I think you answered part of that question. I think we also need to empower and inspire women and encourage them and help them discover their zone of genius. I believe everyone has that, and I think once you discover that, it brings out, it gives you confidence. And and I think as expats, especially as I spoke about when I moved to the US, even if I don't have a job, I could have said, I was volunteering at that time, I could have said, I'm doing this, because you just need to learn to own it. And you can only own it when you overcome your imposter syndrome. And then, of course, as you said, we are worried about people criticizing us and judging us, or even people from our past lives, the life we lived before we became an expat, or they,
Oh,
you know,
yes.
yeah, right? Because you might.
Absolutely. I always think that actually being an expat can be helpful in a way that you're not so confronted with the opinions of people back home. Because
Right.
often the ways you do things, they're more set back home, and you compare yourself to people there. When
Right.
you're an expat, you're a little different.
You
So
can
it
get
can
away.
even be a little helpful.
Right, right.
So now this is something that we can all do to empower ourselves, because Nina told you, and I'm telling you too, we all have something that we're good at. We all have something that we can be proud of, that we can share, and that other people need to hear and need us to show them. So just having this trust, and also being the kind of woman that supports other women on their journeys, whether it's professional or personal, whatever it is that they do, and to cheer each other on and encourage each other, and not pull other women down, right? And so, what else would you say is something that we as women, something that maybe you've witnessed a lot, should stop doing in order for us as a collective to be able to rise up and become more empowered?
So I would say, first of all, I'm thinking of the two S's. One is sorry. We all tend to apologize a lot. And I've heard from, corporate heads and recruiters that, like in companies, if a man does something wrong, he won't apologize, he'll defend it. And again, I know I'm generalizing. When a woman does something wrong, even if she doesn't, she'll apologize and say, I'm sorry. So I think maybe you talk about the ancestors, maybe we were the ones who were apologizing for generations and always having to say sorry. And, men find it harder to. So I think, first of all, we have to stop apologizing. And then secondly, I think we have to learn to sell, whether you have a business or whether it's just yourself. I think need to learn to sell ourselves, and sell, as we said, once you discover your zone of genius, you need to learn to sell that and be authentic when you sell. And I've also heard from, again, recruiters and managers, how women have a hard time asking for a promotion or a raise in salary because they don't think they're good enough. They're apologetic. Even when they're asking for a raise, they kind of apologize. So I think selling what you've done, what you've achieved, we have to make that second nature. Or when you have your own business, for instance, I'll just give you an example. You were talking about me doing events, and now I'm teaching people to do events. So I have to sell the Digital Event Academy, right? And it's so hard for me because I don't know if it's a way we're brought up or it's the framework within our bodies, but it's just hard to tell people, I have this expertise, I have all this value and content that I can share with you and help you get to the next level, but you need to pay me.
Mhm.
And talking about selling and why, we were talking about women supporting women. It's There's also this assumption that when you're helping women, you have to give everything for free. Right now, the Expat Woman is not a nonprofit. I created it, I made it a for-profit because my target audience is middle and higher income expat women and allies. The organization has pivoted into not just expats. And every now and then I'll get an email or a message from someone saying, oh, you say you're supporting women, so why are you charging? You should give everything free. And it's, if you look at a lot of the companies that make products for women, like even if you think of tampons or pads, they're not giving the tampons or pads for free.
Mhm.
Why is it when you're giving women, when you're empowering them through content, that you have to, so there's that attitude again when you're supporting women. And again, how people assume because it's an expat woman, it's a non-profit. Like you
Yeah.
cannot
You
be
can't
off
work
a
for a good cause, but also value your time and money, which I can attest to. I mean,
right.
you, first of all, you have so much, so incredibly much experience in hosting and organizing events. Secondly, yeah, yes, just that you can have a high purpose and a mission and support a good cause, but also charge for it. And that's how the
Right.
world works. And as you were
Right.
talking, I was thinking about, when you were talking about we say sorry too often, which I think, is so true. I can see that in myself. I can see that in other women as well. It's also probably a bit culturally and also a bit the way we were raised.
Hmm.
But I think we just live in this patriarchal world where that, which is actually, it's a beautiful thing, to be compassionate and empathic and say sorry.
Right.
But actually, this is seen as a weakness. So
Right. Right.
that's really
No,
interesting.
I think it's fine to say sorry when you've done something wrong, absolutely. And I make my kids do that all the time, when they do something wrong, sorry, please, thank you. Because I am so shocked nowadays by, going into the whole mom thing. Like many kids just are so entitled. Like
Hmm.
they'll come over to our house and they'll ask for something. They never say thank you, or they might drop something, won't say sorry. So I think it's really important to say sorry. But I was talking about where we just apologize for everything, we say
Yeah.
and we say something which mean and we say sorry, oh so sorry. So that's what I meant, and I can't think of a concrete example, but I think anyone,
I
you and anyone listening, will get the gist of
yeah,
it
and
and
I
get,
do too. And I
yeah,
think we will all recognize a part of us at least in that. Um,
right, right.
yeah.
And I was talking about selling, like not only are we afraid to sell, but then we also, very often, if you look at a product or service that a woman is selling compared to what a man is selling, a woman usually will sell it for a much lower price, because
Yes.
again, we give ourselves and what we can share so little value. And I think that has to change as well, that and this comes from the imposter syndrome, and the
Mm.
feeling, the apologizing and feeling apologetic because you think you're not good enough, and you're charging people all this money for
Yeah.
whatever you can provide them with.
You know what's so interesting? What just came to my mind as well. There's actually a factor in epigenetics that are transmitted to the next generation, and just imagine, right, our mothers, our grandmothers, our great grandmothers, they pretty much had to take the back seat. Let's just say they could not be too successful, they could not be
Right.
too educated, too loud, too this and that. I mean, there were still so many stereotypes and obligations for women. And I like to think, and I read this actually in a book, that this is passed on to us
Mm,
in our epigenetics. So we have this additional burden. And I think it's also a process. And hopefully, the next generation of daughters will be much more confident and will see this as much more natural. But I think for us, it's probably still a process to get comfortable in also being successful and
right,
charging and earning money. I mean, this
right,
is still fairly new. And I think we're probably also missing role models. There are so many role models for men, of successful men, of rich men. And I think women, there are obviously some amazing women who worked really hard and built something great and earned a lot of money, but there's still way too few of them. So we also
absolutely.
need more role models.
I agree.
So, speaking of role models, what kind of role model would you like to be for the next generation? I'm not sure. Do you have daughters?
I do.
Sons? Hmm.
I have, yeah, I do have, yeah. So I, I want, first of all, because as I said, I suffered from, and I still do suffer from the imposter syndrome. And so for me, it's very important that, you know, as a role model, I want the next generation to see that anything's possible, that you could have all these fears and concerns and, feel that you're not good enough at something, but you need to put yourself out there and stumble and fall and fail, but then pick yourself up and go. You don't have to be successful. I think success is just putting yourself out there, whether, and you don't have to even be in the spotlight if you don't want to. I mean, I encourage everyone to be in the spotlight because I think it's a really great way of getting to know yourself. When you get into the spotlight, you're forcing to put yourself to put your best foot forward, and then that gives you so much confidence. But I think it's learning how to you know fall and then pick yourself up. For instance, my daughter, she didn't want to take part in the track and field and cross country. My sons do it. And the first year, I think she was in maybe kindergarten or first grade, and she slowly started pushing herself, and she fell right off the bat in this cross country race with like 100 kids. And then I've been talking to her about being confident and pushing yourself, and even if you fall, and she took that literally. She pulled herself up and she ran, and she came in second or first place in her grade. And
Wow.
she's so proud of that. So every time she falls or falters or fails, we go back to that example of when I did my first not virtual, in-person event. No one showed up. It was a happy hour for expats in San Francisco. I did it at the press club. No one showed up, and I was pivoting into in-person events, and it was like, wow, maybe nobody's interested in this. But then I continued. I persisted because I was passionate about bringing people together through events. I also wanted to monetize them, and I continued. So there have been ups and downs, but there were more ups than downs. So I think I would say just being passionate, persisting, pulling yourself up when you fall, and continuing no matter what. If you believe in yourself, it doesn't, even if no one shows up, you went ahead and did it, right? And that's for me
Absolutely.
the success.
I love that you see it that way, because I do think that for many, it would have been really hard to then go out again and put themselves out there like that again. And as you say, it doesn't have to work the first time, as long as we're persistent and we learn from our mistakes. Not that it was a mistake, but right, we can even make mistakes and learn from them and get better. So we should not give up too quickly.
Yeah, no, and yeah, that was kind of a mistake in a way, because I realized my target audience wasn't interested in happy hours. So it's also sometimes when you fail, it's also, as you say, you learn from your mistakes, and then you can work on, maybe pivoting or taking a step back. But it's also, you learn lessons, right? Because like,
Mhm.
I'll just one last thing, because I know I'm talking about like the digital event academy that I'm doing. I'm launching it. I did my first set of master classes. I've never done them before, and they were very hard. I'm exhausted. It's taken the life out of me. But if I hadn't done it, I wouldn't have learned. I've learned so much. And I was like, even if no one shows up for my masterclass, I'm going to give it my best. I'm going to share all the value. So that's another thing. You also want to treat everything that you do like it's the best one you've ever done, and give as much value as you can to who, even if one person shows up, whether you're selling something or whether you're just providing, you're
Mhm.
volunteering. I think I'm going to treat it like thousands of people showed up and give my best and share my value. So whether people buy or not, they leave having gained something, because again, the compassion and giving back and
Yeah.
helping,
And
empowering people.
also stepping into this role that you want to be eventually, right?
Right.
So you're not some kind of pre-version, you're already stepping into the role of this, for instance, successful event organizer. I think that's also important. We have to
Yeah.
sometimes kind of act as if in order to get there.
Absolutely. And if you make mistakes, so what? People make mistakes. I've been for, events or workshops where you have very successful people leading them, and
Mhm.
something goes wrong, but they're so gracious about it, and they're also so honest and authentic about it. And, you forgive, and because the content that they share is so valuable. So I think that, I think focusing on how can I share with other people, what can I give them, also takes some of the pressure off you and the imposter syndrome, and the lack of self-confidence, like always thinking about how can I help someone else with my expertise.
Yeah, I love that. Now, please tell us about how and why you started the Expat Woman Club. You mentioned it a couple of times now during this interview, but for any of the listeners that aren't familiar with this club, that I am also a proud member of, and several of my previous guests on this podcast have been as well. So what can you tell us about that?
So absolutely, and I'm really happy. You're one of the I would call you a founding member because you joined just after I had started the Expat Club. So there's two things. So I have the Expat Woman, which is my which is it's a social enterprise because it's all focused on inspiring and empowering, but it is a for-profit business. And when I started that in 2013, and I started that, as I shared many times, because I could not find any resources or network or support for higher income and middle income professional women. There were nonprofits that helped women, to find jobs which I would say didn't require degrees. And, there was nothing for us. And it was like, even if you have, you're financially okay, and even though you have degrees, you still need support, right? And sometimes it's equally hard. It doesn't matter where you are in your careers, or you still want that support. And that's why I started this Expat Woman, because I was like, we need support too. Uh, and then I was doing events. I was providing, content through blogs and interviews with people like you from across the world. You've done several
Yeah,
virtual workshops for us and participated, I think, in one of our conferences last year, right? In
yes,
March, I think.
also.
Yeah. So, but I had women coming to me and saying that I want to be part of like a core group. I want to be where I can connect more intimately with other women in the network, because with our events and doing stuff online, you can't really build that community, especially. And since I was only in San Francisco with events, I've done events in a few other countries, but most of my network was San Francisco. I felt I needed to create. So that's how the Expat Women Club came about. It's a membership program, and I have seen so many amazing relationships and collaborations come through people being members of the Expat Women Club. As you said, you've interviewed several women. I've seen women do collaborate and host events together. I've seen them work together. I think there's some women who started businesses together. So the Expat Women Club is an offshoot, or it comes under the umbrella of the Expat Woman. It's a membership club, so people pay a nominal fee to be part of it, and they get additional support. They get those deeper connections. They get to connect also with me, and there's opportunities to speak at events, and find accountability groups, which has to be launched very soon. So it's just a core group of the Expat Woman.
I love it. And I was thinking while you were speaking on the importance of also, just as another advice, maybe for women in general, surrounding ourselves with women who will uplift us and encourage us, like we said before, right? That will bring out the best in us, and that will join us in dreaming bigger. And we want more, right? We want for the next generations, we want more, and we want to be successful in our businesses, or even if we don't have a business, in whatever
Right.
task and project and activity that we have chosen for ourselves and for our lives. And right now this might be difficult to do offline, but we can always take it online. And I think this pandemic has shown us that yes, there are some parts that are missing in the online space, as opposed to seeing others in person. But it comes really, really close to me. And I have some friends that I have never met in person, but they're really close friends. So I think this is also something that we just have to get used to now. And we're pushed to do this now with the pandemic going on and everything, to make meaningful connections online. And I think for expats that have a bit of a harder time in finding their tribe, let's say, in their host country, the online world, the online space is such a big opportunity, and clubs like the Expat Woman are as well. So now, can you tell us how could people, for instance, join the Expat Woman, or how could they find out more about you and about the events you host?
Sure. They can go to the expatwoman.com, my website, and there's a link to memberships if they're interested in the club. Whatever events I have coming up, there's right on the homepage, there's the latest events, which are in a like a slideshow. So there's a lot of information there. I will share the link with you. And
Mhm.
because this podcast is being launched or aired in March, I am hosting I do this every year. I host an event around International Women's Day, and I'm hosting my empowered event in March, and then I also do one in May, because in March it's kind of overwhelming. There's so many events happening, so I do a smaller one in March, and then I do the big one in May. So the March one leads into the May one. So the March one is actually a game. It's called Game Changers: Creating Influence and Impact. So I'm going to have a virtual panel of women who are very successful, and who are not just successful, but they're creating impact and influence through the work they do. And this will lead into my event in May, which is going to be focused on helping women get out of the shadows and into the spotlight. Because I
I
really,
love it. I
yeah,
love it. Oh, wow.
yeah, because I think it's really, I've learned in the last year with the pandemic, as you said, it's been harder because it's all virtual. But I think it's we all need to do this at some point, whether it's professionally or personally. We have to, and it's great for our children, whether you have sons or daughters. Like my sons see their mom working, they see their dad and their mom, having equal roles in their professional lives and personal lives. I think it's very empowering for sons as well. I'm sure for your
Yeah.
boys, I know you have 3
Yeah, I
sons.
have 3 sons.
Yeah, I'm sure that's very empowering for them. You may not realize it, but to see a mom who's, doing all this amazing work. I know they have to be with their babysitter. Like, I know my kids sometimes feel I'm on the computer too much, but so long as we make time for them, I think it's important for them to see their mothers in roles that, that one day they may have to connect with, women in power. Maybe they have a woman boss, or they have a
Of course.
wife who's a very strong woman, professional woman. And I think that's how we can also
To
change.
normalize that. Yeah.
Yeah, because not just empowering our daughters, but I think it's very important to empower our sons, our husbands, men, the men in our families. And so I think that's important for a woman's success as well. And, so we can continue the cycle of empowered women and men empowering women, and women empowering men, because we need to support and
Yeah,
empower our husbands and sons.
exactly. I love that. So I thank you so much for coming on and talking to us about all kind of, female topics of interest, hopefully, and sharing your advice and your experience and everything that you've learned on your journey as well. And yes, I think with that, we've come to the end of the interview.
Thank you so much, Camilla, for having me on the show. I was going to apologize and say sorry, maybe I rambled, but then I thought I need to follow my own advice and not apologize and own it. And I think we need to own it. So thank you. Thanks for giving me this opportunity. I'm excited to hear the podcast and excited to see all the amazing things that you continue to do with your business.
Yes, thank you very much. I am too, and same for you. And yes, so then I guess we wish everyone, all of the listeners, a happy International Women's Day. And I will link everything, all the links that you mentioned in the session notes, and I'll be back next week with another episode. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. Please make sure to share this episode with your expat besties and show me some love in the reviews. Want more juicy content designed for expat wives? Then head over to my website, www.camillaqintana.com, or follow me on Instagram and Facebook at coach.camillaquintana.